Discover 8 spine-chilling paranormal encounters caught on camera, sinister truths exposed. The Mitchell family had it all: a cozy suburban life in a quiet Ohio neighborhood, a charming house nestled under tall oaks, 2 bright kids, and a love that felt unbreakable. But one night, their peace shattered. They had just installed a high-tech security system, feeling that extra layer of protection would keep them safe. How wrong could they be? Perched in their living room, the cameras blinked to life, casting an eerie glow that transformed their familiar space into something foreboding. It started with harmless alerts, a shadow darting across the screen. Was it just the wind? Or maybe a cat wandering too close? But with every bump and creaking floorboard at night, apprehension settled in like a thick fog. Little did they know, darkness had its own designs. "Mom, look!" Emma's voice trembled as she pointed at the screen. A figure stood at the edge of their yard, just beyond the porch light. The family's laughter froze in their throats. It was Mr. Goldstein, their neighbor, who usually wore a warm smile. Yet, under the cover of night, his demeanor shifted. What were those whispers? Why was he outside, pacing, his eyes darting toward their house? "It's probably just a prank," Mark assured them later, though his voice wavered. But each night grew worse. Strange symbols appeared etched into the wooden fence. Ethan found a wilted patch of flowers seemingly overnight, roots choked with darkness as if drained of life. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. They had staked so much faith in Mr. Goldstein. Now, the trusted neighbor turned specter loomed over them. They dug deeper into his past, unearthing chilling folklore of families who vanished in the woods, connected to something ancient and sinister. Their sense of safety eroded as paranoia seeped into family dinners and backyard barbecues. On one particularly menacing night, they crept wide-eyed around the house, flashlights in trembling hands, hearts pounding like drums. Every corner felt malevolent. Quiet? Too quiet. Chants echoed from the woods, wrapping around their senses, tightening their chests with sheer terror. Peering into the camera, they saw him again, Mr. Goldstein, cloaked in mist, eyes fixed on something hidden behind them. And then it happened. The darkness pulsated, something shifted just beyond their hilts. Twisting, unnatural shapes slithered from the trees. A breath caught, a heart raced. This wasn't just fear, it was raw dread that churned deeply. Mark's voice cracked as he shouted for the kids to retreat inside, but what was emerging from the woods had no human face. And as the pounding at their door began, a horrifying realization gripped them. The threat wasn't just their neighbor. Something darker, something deeply rooted in the land itself, clawed its way toward them. Would they escape the looming shadows before it was too late? The pounding at the door became an insistent thunder. Each thud echoed in a frenzy, rattling Mark's bones, leaving him paralyzed. Emma and Ethan clung to their mother, wide-eyed with terror. Uncertainty knotted in their throats. This wasn't any ordinary visitor. "Who's there?" Mark shouted, though the words felt hollow. Silence swallowed the question, but the air vibrated with a palpable energy, the kind that ignites every hair on your body. He dared to glance at the camera feed, his heart racing. The screen flickered, showing only darkness and the vague outline of something tall, distorted. What was it? Some malevolent force? Or Mr. Goldstein himself, possessed by whatever evil lurked in the woods? "Stay back!" he yelled, moving towards the door, his bravado masking a gut-wrenching fear. But the sound at the door changed. No longer a hammering. Now it was a whisper, haunting and soft, like wind rustling dead leaves. "Let me in." The voice was raspy and wrong, a nightmare spilling out of a dream. For a split second, Mark's mind flashed to the folklore, the lost families, the ominous fate that awaited those who dared to engage with the sinister woods. Every fiber of him screamed to ignore it, to retreat to the safety of his family. Yet he felt compelled to open the door. "Mark, don't!" Linda's voice was frantic, laced with the kind of fear that shakes the soul. "It's not safe." Tears brimmed in her eyes. She gripped her children tightly, instinct taking over as a bleak realization swept through her. "Maybe we can reason with him?" Mark suggested weakly, yet doubt crept in around the edges. He rummaged through his thoughts, desperate for a plan. Nothing came. "Mom, please," Ethan quavered, but Emma shook her head, tightening her grasp on her brother. "Look!" She pointed at the screen again, blood draining from her face. For an instant, they saw it. A flash of something dark and unholy slithering through the camera's view, joining the figure of Mr. Goldstein. It was as if the shadows had a life of their own, undulating, reaching out towards them, begging to break free. "Look away!" Mark shouted, pulling the kids away from the screen, just as the door burst open with a deafening crash. Wood splintered and the lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness. A shape loomed in the threshold, backlit by the moon's pale glow. It was no longer the Mr. Goldstein they once knew. The lines of his face contorted, shadows moving over him like water, leaving nothing familiar. And in that moment, the lights flickered back on, illuminating the nightmare cast before them.
"Help me," the creature wheezed, reaching with fingers twisted and elongated, the gaze of Mr. Goldstein's eyes replaced by a hollow void. They stumbled back, a group retreat, away from the pulsating horror now filling their home. "What have you done?" Mark yelled, his voice cracking as he glanced at the window. The woods whispered back, sinuous darkness beckoning. Then the chant rose again from the trees, now a cacophony, a symphony of damnation. "Join us! Join us!" The family stood frozen, terror wrapping around them like a noose, paralyzed in the realization that the nightmare wasn't just standing at their door, but was seeping into their lives, infecting everything they held dear. The sound kept growing, pulsating with a malevolence that felt alive, reverberating through the walls. What had begun as a single figure now morphed into darkness itself, a force of ancient terror. And deep within, hidden in the maze of fear, a truth beckoned to be unearthed. Could they uncover the history behind Mr. Goldstein, the shadows and the haunting woods before it was too late? Or was it already too late for the Mitchell family to escape the clutches of a darkness that wanted to claim them forever? The air thickened, charged with an unnatural pulse as the creature stepped over the broken doorframe. The room seemed to contract, the walls closing in, as if the house itself meant to swallow the horror. Mark backed up until his spine met the rough texture of the wall, his breath shallow, struggling against the weight of fear that pressed upon him. "Get back!" Linda shouted, pushing the kids behind her, her maternal instincts flaring like a fire against the encroaching shadow. Images of their home, once a sanctuary, now warped into a trap filled with malignancy, flashed in Mark's mind. He didn't recognize it anymore, just like he didn't recognize the man in front of him. "Help me," the creature rasped again, the voice echoing as if it were barely alive, drawn out and wheezy. Every syllable dripped with desperation that clawed at their hearts. Yet, with every breath, the malice wrapped tighter around them. The beast moved forward, pushing its twisted limbs into the space they so desperately tried to defend. Each of its limbs seemed like a grotesque mimicry of what a human should be, reminding Mark of the folklore that haunted his childhood. They whispered of possession, of beings lost in the woods, twisted by some unseen force, becoming unspeakable horrors, the very creatures they had dismissed as mere stories until now. Mark shook his head, willing his mind to focus. "Stay back!" he shouted again, though uncertainty laced his voice. He reached instinctively for the nearest object, a chair, lifting it as a makeshift shield. Emma's small voice trembled. What is that?" I don't know," Mark stammered, searching around the room for anything that could help them. In the dim light, the shadows of family heirlooms loomed, struck with the sudden reminder of home stripped away. "Look, Ethan!"
cried, pointing toward the shattered door. The moonlight spilled across the floor, revealing swarming shadows that crawled from the woods. They slithered like living smoke, reaching towards the children. "Close the door!" Linda yelled, scrambling to block the threshold. She dropped to her knees, struggling to clear the debris as chilling whispers penetrated the air. "Join us. Join us." "No! Stay away!" Mark's voice cracked as he screamed, raising the chair defensively. But the whispers wrapped angrily around him, squeezing him in their dark embrace, making him doubt his own reality. Suddenly, windows began to rattle, as if the house itself were alive, in agony at the intrusion. Objects toppled over, sending the family into a frenzied panic. Mark saw the form of Mr. Goldstein, no, whatever he had become, smiling a devilish grin, a glimmer of sinister pleasure lighting what was left of his eyes. With a sudden lurch, Ethan cried out as his mother, still trying to seal the door, was pulled away as spectral hands reached from the inky blackness. Her nails scraped against the wooden floorboards, grasping for anything solid. "Mom, no!" The world dissolved into screams, panic shattering the air. "Run! Get up the stairs!" Mark shouted, grabbing both kids and yanking them close. Their feet barely touched the ground as adrenaline propelled them up the staircase. The stairs creaked under the weight of impending dread, each step a gamble against the darkness that crawled behind them. They burst into the narrow hallway, heads darting for places to hide. Behind them, a thud resonated, the creature breaking through whatever it was they had left behind. Heart racing, Mark slammed the door to the first room he found, locking it before stumbling further inside. To the ghost of hope or a trap waiting to tighten around them? A deep growl emanated from the other side of the door, monstrous and relentless. "Did we lose it?" Emma whispered, her voice barely a flicker in the growing gloom. Mark pressed his ear against the door, silence answering his desperation. But tension hung thick in the room, a fragile spell of hope against an angry reality. Outside, the whispers faded for a moment, only to rise again. "Join us, join us." In a heartbeat, Mark knew they were not safe. The darkness still remained, growing closer, slithering around them like a serpent waiting for its prey. With dread coiling in his gut, he turned to his children. "Get ready," he whispered. "We need to figure out what it wants." But as he spoke, tremors shook the house, and the growing chorus of voices from the trees pulled the family toward a darkness even deeper than before. What lay ahead was uncertain, but they could feel the call. Would they join the shadows or accept their fate? It was all beginning to unravel, and somewhere in the depths, a truth awaited. Mark's heart raced as he grappled with the uncertainty that clouded his mind. The whispers outside grew louder, a malignant cacophony, pressing against the fragile barrier of the door. His kids were huddled close, their wide eyes reflecting sheer terror. "Mom will be okay, right?" Ethan's voice quivered. Each word was a small cut, carving deeper into Mark's resolve. "Of course," he said, though bile rose in his throat. He swallowed it down, staring hard at the door, wishing with all his being for it to hold. Another thud echoed against the wooden door, shaking the frame, as if the creature was testing its resolve, hunting its prey patiently. "What if it gets in, Dad?" Emma's small hands gripped his arm, nails digging in. The response hung heavy. He had no answer. And then the whispers shifted, clearer now, piercing through the darkness. "Let us in! Let us in!" Mark felt cold sweat bead on his forehead, crawling down the back of his neck. There was something unnatural about those voices, like the moans of lost souls in eternal suffering. They were enticing, promising something just out of reach. "Stay quiet," he whispered harshly, not wanting to draw attention. Each second ticked agonizingly by, the tension in the air thick enough to slice. Out of desperation, he turned to the room's sparse furniture, seeking a weapon. A table lamp caught his eye. He snatched it up, hefting its weight in his hands. If it breaks through, he thought, trying to convince himself, this might help. Ethan clung to Emma, his own eyes darting between the door and his father, searching for a sign of strength that felt as elusive as their escape. The whispers outside transformed, morphing from desperate pleas into taunting laughter, high-pitched and sinister. Suddenly, the door trembled violently. Something pushed against it from the other side. Mark felt his stomach drop. "Get back!" he shouted, raising the lamp like a sword, ready to defend his family. The door inched ajar, creaking ominously as shadows began to leak through the crack, swirling like black smoke. "No!" He shoved hard against the door, but it groaned in protest, the creature's weight pushing against him relentlessly. "Help me!" It was a plea, human yet distorted, curling around his heart. Mark's resolve shattered, conflicting emotions swirling within him. Was this the man they knew, or just a hollow shell filled with darkness? "Daddy!" Emma cried, fear slicing through the fragile threads of hope. Before he could respond, the door burst open, splintering wood showering in all directions. The creature lunged, twisted limbs reaching for them. Its grin widened impossibly, revealing teeth that glistened like broken glass in the dim light. Mark swung the lamp down hard, but the creature anticipated the move, deflecting it with a bone-crunching crack. The room exploded into chaos as shadows surged forward, enveloping them in chilling tendrils. "Run! Go!" he managed to scream, shoving the kids toward a window, desperate for an escape. The darkness dragged at their feet, but he could hear their footsteps pounding against the wooden floor, echoing his command to survive. "Daddy, don't leave us!" Mark's vision blurred. He was losing them, losing control. In a heartbeat, he lunged toward the window, scrambling to open it. As the frame creaked wide, a sudden rush of night air filled the room, scented with decay and ash. The creatures outside screeched in rage, as if sensing the escape, drawn to their hope like moths to a flame. "I'll get you out!" he shouted, his voice laced with desperation. Just as Emma slipped through the window, the room shook violently again. Then the creature lunged, its horrific visage filling Mark's view, and all he could see were those malevolent eyes. "Join us," it moaned again, the whispers now a chorus that drowned all else. Before he could even scream, the world around him twisted into a darker nightmare, and everything fell silent. In that suffocating silence, one question burned through the blackness. What had they unwittingly released into their lives? The truth clawed closer, but Mark felt himself slipping away, the shadows engulfing him whole. As darkness consumed his vision, a chilling thought echoed. What if it wanted not just him, but all of them? The darkness wrapped around Mark like a cold mist, sinking deeper and deeper into his bones. Even as he fought to swim through it, he knew it was too late.
His strength faded, warmth retreating, and he felt his heartbeat slowing, each thud a farewell. He couldn't see, but he could hear. The whispers, now louder, echoing in his mind, a cruel mix of dread and longing. "Join us." It was a chant, rhythmic and seductive, drawing him toward the heart of the shadows. In that swirling void, images flashed before him. His family, their laughter, moments of joy he had taken for granted. Screams of fear pierced through the darkness, pulling him back momentarily. "Dad!" He bolted upright, gasping for breath, only to realize he was still in the room, but it felt different, abnormal. The shadows danced across the walls, flickering like flames, twisting and writhing as if alive. "Ethan! Emma!" he called out, his voice shuddering with panic. The room was empty. The air felt thick, oppressive. Had they escaped? Where were they? Then he heard it, a soft rustling, breathing, somewhere in the shadows. It was as if something stirred, too close for comfort. Heart racing, he turned slowly, scanning every corner. But all he found were reflections of the darkness that now felt sentient. "Mark." The voice was a whisper, low and unnerving, slinking around the edges of his sanity. He knew it wasn't his children. "Show yourself!" he shouted, steadied by a flicker of determination. The shadows shivered in response, coiling tighter around him. From the corner of his eye, a figure emerged, a memory taking form. It was his wife, Sarah, but twisted. Her face was set in a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. They were dull, lifeless, filled with a void that made a chill crawl down his spine. "Mark, why didn't you help me?"
Floating closer, her voice thick with sorrow. His throat felt tight, and he stumbled back, the shadows closing in on him, as if reveling in his fear. "You're not her!" The words came out as a desperate plea, trembling slightly. "But I am!" She laughed softly, a sound that spiraled into an echo of despair. "Don't you want to join us? It's peaceful here." Mark shook his head violently, trying to break free from the grip of the memory. "Where are my kids?" he demanded, the anger fueling his resolve. "They're safe, for now." The shadows shifted, revealing a flicker of their presence. Ethan and Emma, silhouettes trapped somewhere just beyond reach, their cries muted, fragile. "Let them go!" He lunged towards the smog-like form of his wife, but the darkness spun, evading him, its grip tightening around his limbs. He felt it pulling him, slowly, inexorably, toward a yawning abyss that promised eternal rest. "No!" he shouted, fighting against despair. "I won't let you take me! I won't leave them!" The laughter grew, a symphony of anguish. "You've already lost, Mark. You can join us, or let the shadows take your family." Terror flared in his heart. He couldn't let that happen. Searching through the fog, he grasped inside himself, searching for the last remnants of hope. The blood pounding in his ears roared louder than the whispers around him. In a moment of clarity, he thought of Ethan and Emma. He could almost feel their small hands reaching out. With one fierce determination, he shouted, "Not today!" Mark pushed against the shadows with every ounce of his will, light igniting within him, sparking a sudden brilliance that pierced the darkness. But as the shadows writhed and recoiled, Mark felt something colder than fear wrap around his heart, the possibility that perhaps it was too late. As he fought with everything he had, one terrifying realization hit him. If he could spark the light, what else might he awaken? When the last breath of darkness around him shuddered, he screamed, "I'll fight for them!" But would it be enough?
In that moment, the whispers shifted once more urgent, more thrilled. Then let the games begin. The shadows quivered, darkness pulsating in anticipation. What game lay before him in this unfathomable night? What horrors had he unwittingly unleashed? Mark could hardly comprehend his surroundings. The shadows now pulsated like a dark heartbeat, as if they were alive and aware of him. Heart racing, he fought against the encroaching darkness, light flaring dimly from within. But the flicker of hope felt tenuous, a match threatened by an unforgiving wind. "Let's play!" The deep voice echoed through the space, curling like smoke around him. It grew louder, shifting from a whisper to a terrifying shout that nearly drowned out his thoughts. "Who are you?" Mark screamed, desperation clawing at his throat. No response followed, just the slithering caress of shadows teasing the fringes of his awareness. Suddenly, there was a shift, a trembling,
shuddering movement that felt too deliberate to be random. Murmurs began spiraling from the corners of the room. They formed shapes, faces emerging from the dark. Screams filled the air, twisted contortions of horror and despair, shadows reflecting agony etched in the visual cacophony. "Join us," a chorus of voices sang in a haunting harmony. Mark's breath caught in his throat, panic flooding his veins as he pushed back, claws of darkness grasping at his ankles, pulling him lower. He couldn't breathe, couldn't fight, they were pulling him under. He shut his eyes tight, focusing on his children's faces. Their innocent laughter echoed, but now it was marred by the viscous shadows, their calls warped into something sinister and mocking. "Mark! Daddy! Help!" The words twisted in an eerie manner, half the syllables choked, as if being swallowed by the very darkness that surrounded him. "Enough!" he roared, summoning a power from somewhere deep within. "I'm coming for you!" And he lunged forward. With a surge of determination, he reached out an arm, fingers stretching into the dense blackness. It felt as if something was waiting for his touch, a hunger thrumming through the dark that met his skin with a shocking coldness. Mark gasped as the frigid air clutched his flesh. "Foolish man," the voice hissed, now sultry and near. "You will find only despair. We know your fears, your desires. So many have joined the game." A vision struck him, vivid and terrible. Each shadow a trapped soul, a former player twisted in torment. They were reflections of those who had lost hope, unable to break through. The thought crashed against him like a wave of icy water. "No!" he shouted defiantly. "I will not be like them." His pulse thudded as he shoved his hands deeper into the darkness, searching for anything, any shred of light he could cling to. And then, through the veil of despair, something shifted. A glimmer of white caught his eye, the faint outline of Ethan's and Emma's faces, desperate and pale. "Daddy!" Their cries sliced through him like a dagger. "Hold on!" he screamed, stretching his hands further, but the darkness tightened its grip, wrapping around his wrists like a shackling chain. "I'm coming!" The shadows flared, recoiling momentarily, almost as if they were afraid of the resolve emanating from him. The laughter warped into furious snarls. The faces twisted in rage, their features distorting grotesquely, seeking revenge on the one who dared to fight. "Fool, you think you can defy us?" The mocking chorus escalated into chaos, each voice melding into a cacophony of dread. A sudden surge of energy rose from within him, a flicker of light that fought to dance in the shadows. The darkness recoiled, screeching as if burned. "I won't let you take my family!" Mark's voice rang with a confidence he didn't fully feel. But as the shadows shrieked and pulled against him, a terrible truth started to unfurl in the pit of his stomach. The game had only just begun, and with each moment he fought, the darkness would change, adapt, and grow stronger.
What awaited him next? He had no idea, but with each breath, he felt a choice looming closer. The shadows throbbed with anticipation. Let the weight of the past decide your fate. And then Mark felt a pull, something deeper than any fear, something that sent a shiver up his spine. It was a choice, but would he dare take it? The very air seemed alive with tension. What would he awaken next? Mark swayed on the precipice of despair, the whispers of shadows clawing at his psyche. They were not just voices anymore. They had taken form, their ghastly figures hovering just out of reach, eager to drag him into their world of suffering. Panic surged like venom in his veins as the darkness writhed and pulsed around him, a grotesque sea of faces and bodies, stitching itself into a living tapestry of dread. "Choose wisely," the sultry voice taunted, echoing like a well-rehearsed curse. "Choose or lose everything." The weight of the past clawed at him, a reminder of every misstep, every moment he had failed to protect his loved ones. Memories swirled in his mind, fragments of laughter and warmth juxtaposed against the coldness encasing him now. He remembered his children, their faces bright with life, yet here they were mere shadows, echoes of joy twisted into a symphony of torment. "Mark! Daddy!" The cries pierced through the commotion like shards of glass, each scream causing his heart to constrict tighter. They were there, trapped, but so close. The image of Ethan's mischievous grin, juxtaposed with Emma's sweet, trusting smile, fueled him, igniting a fire within. "Not today," he growled, his voice low and steady. He started to push back against the malevolent force, feed the flicker of light inside him. Each heartbeat pulsed stronger, battling the encroaching despair. "I won't surrender!" Rage erupted within him. He reached deeper, clawing into the dark. Something coiled around his mind, urging him to doubt, to surrender. But he couldn't, not now. The figures surrounding him shifted, faces morphing into grotesque parodies of his past mistakes. Friends lost, promises broken, moments of weakness, all materialized in exaggerated horror to taunt him. "Join us," they hissed, their mouths closing in tandem, a chorus of lost souls. "Shut up!" he shouted, words slashing through the thick atmosphere. The shadows recoiled, and for a moment, silence enveloped him, heavy and unnerving. Heart pounding, he could feel the shifting dynamics of darkness, as if it were recalibrating in response to his defiance. He bent down, gripping the icy floor, steadying himself. "I'll find you. I'll save you." The light inside him flickered more fiercely now. It was no longer just a beacon of hope. It was a shield, a weapon. Come out, wherever you are," the deep voice crooned mockingly, a palpable menace dripping from each word. Shadows twisted and writhed restlessly, hungry for his terror. As if, sensing his resolve, the dark began to coalesce, forming a gate, an opening into another world, where screams echoed, begging for release. A glimpse of Ethan and Emma appeared beyond that door, faces frantic, hands outstretched. Their cries were desperate, raw. "Daddy, please!" "Now!" The force roared in a clash of chaos, engulfing the air in malevolence. Mark could feel the shadows tightening, a noose of despair squeezing him as he struggled to break through. His breath came in quick bursts, warmth fading as he felt the darkness wrapping around him once more. But with every ounce of fury left within, he lunged forward toward the gate, pushing past the chilling tendrils. "Let go!" he screamed, arms flailing, desperate to connect with his children, to bring them back. He plunged headfirst into the abyss, not knowing if he would emerge with them or become another lost soul in this twisted game. And then the darkness collapsed inwards. He was falling now, spiraling into a void, thick with terror, the faces of tortured souls lingering at the edges.
As he plummeted, the echo of the voice returned, softer yet intoxicating. Let's play. What would await him in the depths? Would he ever find his children, or become part of the shadows forever? The crash of fear, mixed with an unyielding hope, spiraled into a question he could no longer ignore. Would breaking free mean sacrificing everything he once cherished? The moment Mark hit the ground, it felt like slamming into ice. He thrashed, gasping for breath, disoriented and trembling. All around him was nothing but darkness, a suffocating shroud that pressed against his skin, chilling him to the core. He reached out, desperate to find any sign of life, any familiar warmth, but his hands scraped against emptiness. "Daddy!" The voices were there again, twisted echoes that lingered in the corners of his mind. Ethan and Emma's cries wrapped around him, weaving through the darkness like chains. He could almost see them, flickers of light in a night of despair. "Help us!" Desperation clawed at him. He pushed himself up, his heart pounding like a warning drum. Shadows swirled violently around him, forming ghostly figures that writhed and twisted with hunger. Their expressions contorted into menacing smiles, teeth sharp enough to tear into his very soul. He felt a fury rising within him, a blaze fueled by love and fear. "I'm coming!" he roared, the words tearing free from his throat. In response, the shadows coalesced, jabbing and poking at him, feeding off his dread. The grotesque silhouettes hissed and cackled, shadows dancing with malicious intent. "You're too late!" they screeched in chilling harmony, their voices scratching against his eardrums. "Join us or lose them forever!" A vision struck him, dark water, thick and murky, swallowing his children whole. His breath hitched. Panic threatened to rip him apart. He clenched his fists, fighting against the surge of despair. "No! I won't let you take them! I'd rather burn!" With a primal scream, he forced himself forward, smashing through the visions swirling around him. The dark figures recoiled, a ripple of uncertainty coursing through their ranks. Their mocking laughter faltered, replaced by a low growl of discontent. He could feel momentum building. There was power in his resolve, something the shadows had not anticipated. "Listen to me!" he yelled into the abyss. "You have no hold over me! You'll never win!" Just then, a flicker of light emerged, a beam cutting through the oppressive darkness. It grew, illuminating the space around him with a soft warmth. He felt it on his skin, hope, like the sun breaking through a storm cloud. He stumbled towards it, yanking at the tendrils of darkness that still gripped his legs. With each step, memories surged. Memories of laughter, of family game nights, stories at bedtime, the simple touches of hands clasped tight. The light pulsed, and he could see Emma and Ethan clearer now, their faces a mixture of fear and hope. A fragile bridge formed between them, shimmering with energy. "Daddy!" they cried in unison. "I'm here! I'm coming!" he shouted, lunging forward. He could feel their warmth, pulling him through the shadows, battling against the cold fingers that sought to drag him back. But as he surged ahead, the shadows roared, feeding off his power, growing stronger. Mark's heart raced. "I'm not afraid of you!" he shouted, feeling the swirling darkness tug at his resolve. But there was something different now. The light inside him burned fiercely, igniting his spirit. "I'll fight for them! I'll take them back!" As he inched closer to the glowing figures of his children, a deafening silence fell. The shadows halted, coiling like serpents, ready to strike. He could almost taste their fury, dread and rage clashing in a twisted whirlwind of power. And then, in a heart-stopping moment, Mark's foot struck something solid, a threshold into another realm. He could feel the energy surging as the light reached out, wrapping around his trembling hands. But before he could break through, darkness surged back, encircling him tighter. The shadows shrieked in anger, pulling him in two directions, light or dark, love or despair. Mark gritted his teeth, caught in a battle that raged within him.
Somewhere, deep down, he wondered if fighting meant losing something he couldn't see, something beyond the veil of light and darkness. As the shadows began to dissolve, a crack appeared, a tear in reality itself. Yet what lay beyond was a void of uncertainty. Would the risk be worth it, or was he stepping into a trap? "Daddy!" The cries echoed once more. Desperation layered thick over them. He had to choose quickly. With a final surge of will, Mark reached for the light, but could it reach back in time? Mark's fingers grazed the edge of that pulsing light, warmth flooding his veins like molten lava. It felt real, solid, much more than the swirling shadows that clung to him. The cries of his children surged anew, desperate, filled with a haunting urgency. "Daddy!"
Called, the sound an anchor pulling him closer, closer to that thin line between hope and despair. But as he stretched out, something sharp latched onto his ankle, a chain of shadow, yanking him backward with brutal force. He stumbled, teetering on the precipice of the unknown, as the clamoring of the dark figures grew deafening. Their whispers turned to shouts, a cacophony that echoed inside his skull, snatching at his sanity. "Join us!" they howled, their voices a chorus of agony and seduction. "Your love cannot save you. You will never escape." Mark clenched his jaw, trying to shake them off. He lunged again for the light, its warmth enveloping him like a protective cocoon. For a flicker of a second, he saw Ethan and Emma's faces clearly. Their eyes glimmered with tears, a reflection of both hope and terror. "I won't let you go," he shouted, fear morphing into determination. But the shadows laughed, a low, rumbling sound that crawled beneath his skin. He could feel their cold breath on his neck, their fingers brushing against his, pulling him. He wrenched himself free, planting his feet firmly on the unseen ground. Each breath became a battle, the air thick around him, slow and suffocating. "Step back," he growled. Gritting his teeth, Mark closed his eyes, tapping into the deepest part of his love, transforming it into fury. He was their father. He would not yield, not today. The dark figures writhed, suddenly uncertain, their malevolent shapes shifting and blending, morphing into twisted faces of the ones he cherished most. An image of his own mother emerged, her smile tainted with sadness. "Mark," she whispered, her voice sweet yet chilling. "Don't fight it. You were meant to join the darkness." "No!" he thundered, shaking his head violently. Memories flooded him, unyielding and fierce. He recalled his children's laughter, their tiny hands gripping his tightly, trust radiating from their innocent hearts. "I won't let you take my family!" Mark opened his eyes, that spark igniting inside him, a blinding light piercing through the vast abyss. The shadows recoiled, their forms melting away in the face of his ferocity. With a final guttural roar, he leaped forward, aiming to bridge that gap once and for all. But just as he lunged, the ground trembled violently. A fissure opened beneath him, darkness swirling with a voracious appetite. The light flickered dangerously, illuminating the terror around him, revealing glimpses of countless faces trapped within the depths, faces he recognized. Lost souls crying out in despair, caught in an endless loop of suffering. He froze, horror crashing over him. Were these the remnants of those who had fought too? Had they too thought they could save their beloveds? "Mark!" The voices of Ethan and Emma surged stronger, but they were breaking through the chaos, their eyes wide with fear, yet filled with something else, an undeniable connection, a promise of unity. The shadows howled in rage, tearing at the edges of his consciousness, threatening to drag
him into the void. "You can't save them!" they screamed in a chorus of despair. "Watch me," he cried, jumping toward the light. In that instant, everything exploded. A blinding flash engulfed him, and for a fleeting moment, he felt weightless,
as if all the burdens felt lifted. Whispering hopes swirled around him like autumn leaves caught in a storm. And then, darkness again, vibrant and thick, but a whisper of warmth remained lingering. "Daddy, please." The crack was widening, a glimpse of colors and shapes beyond. But the question pulsed through him. Would he find his children there, or was it a portal to an even darker fate? He braced himself against the surging tide, but his resolve faltered. Would he be strong enough to endure whatever lay ahead? In that haunting moment, Mark held his breath, ready to plunge. Into what? The crack echoed ominously, and he braced himself for what was to come. Fears entwined with every heartbeat, waiting for the answer to unfold. The darkness roared, but Mark's heart throbbed with fierce determination. He could not let fear have him. He loved his children too deeply to surrender. "Not today!" he shouted, the words tearing from him like a battle cry. He propelled himself forward, launching into the crack that shimmered with hope. And then, in a burst of light, everything went silent. Time twisted around him. Everything felt like a whisper, a dream suspended in that fleeting moment between fear and hope. The warmth enveloped him, igniting his spirit. He reached for it, desperately grabbing on to the tendrils of light that beckoned him forward. Then, just as suddenly, everything collided. He fell onto solid ground with a crash, the shattering of darkness erupting all around. Dazed, Mark pushed himself up, flinging his eyes open to a new world. A radiant light surrounded him, bright and blinding at first, washing away the shadows like a rushing tide. His heart raced. A voice, soft, angelic, and pure, echoed in the air. "Daddy!" A thrill shot through him as he turned. There they were. Ethan and Emma stood before him, unharmed and glowing with warmth, beaming smiles radiating comfort. Tears stung his eyes as he fell to his knees, pulling them into a tight embrace. "I thought I lost you," he breathed, the moment swallowing his fears. Their laughter rang like music in the ethereal glow. Mark's heart swelled, wrapping them both in a cocoon of love. But then the shadows condensed, swirling at the edges of this new reality. They loomed like angry storms, hissing and snapping at the light, desperate for their prey. Realization hit Mark like a freight train. "It's not over! We need to go!" he yelled, turning to his children, panic swirling just beneath the surface. Ethan's grip tightened around his father's arm. "Where do we go?" he asked, confusion mixed with fear. "Follow me! We can't give in!" Mark felt adrenaline surge, pushing away the encroaching darkness that clawed for them. The three of them
bolted across the barren landscape, the light behind them diminishing as the shadows grew bolder, desperate to reclaim their lost souls. "Don't look back!" Mark shouted, urging them to go faster. The shadows slithered, dark tendrils reaching for the warmth of their bodies, but every step they took sent bursts of light spiraling from their hearts, illuminating the path ahead. "Together!" Mark urged, pulling them both close again. "Together we can do this!" The shadows howled, a cacophony vibrating through their bones, trying to snuff out the light. But each echo only fueled their strength, each dark whisper turning into a challenge to overcome. "Run!" he bellowed as they sprinted past the fury of the shadows, a desperation fueling their resolve. Behind them, furious voices screeched, clamoring for them to return. "Do not forsake us! Join us!" Mark pressed onward, a newfound sense of power igniting his very soul. "We will not!" he declared, the words bursting forth like shards of fire. Through the chaos, he glimpsed the glimmer of a horizon, a thin line separating light from shadow. They were so close! With the echo of their laughter propelling him, he raced forward, just as the shadows erupted behind them, one final grasp for their fleeting hope. Mark pushed himself harder, heart throbbing against the pounding of darkness, and in a blinding flash, they broke through. They burst into a realm filled with white, light cascading around them like a warm embrace. In that stunning silence, everything transformed. The shadows melted away as they crossed the threshold, retreating into obscurity, howling in frustration. And then, stillness. The warmth enveloped them, casting away the fear. Mark looked down at his children, safe in his arms, their faces glowing with relief and love. "Daddy?" Emma's voice was soft, tinged with uncertainty now. "Did we win?" Mark knelt down, taking both their faces between his hands. "Yes, we are together. We are free." They shared a moment of shimmering peace, the shadows banished for now, no longer able to grasp at what they could not hold. As the light moved around them, he felt the heaviness in his heart begin to lift. But he knew the fight wasn't over. He'd always be ready for whatever darkness sought to intrude on their joy. "Let's go home," he said, taking their hands. They took a step together, leaving the remnants of fear behind them, moving toward a future where love prevailed over darkness. Mark took a deep breath, a promise echoing in his heart. He would always protect them. They walked on, light washing over them, toward the horizon, leaving the shadows to whisper among themselves, a haunting memory of a battle won, but a cosmic war that would never truly end. And now, dear reader, as Mark's journey comes to a close, it's your turn to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you won't miss out on the next exclusive stories that delve into the depths of the unknown. Smash that like button now
To keep feeding that algorithm, fueling our journey together. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this riveting conclusion. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to experience this gripping story. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.